Hello, Mr. Mailer here, your online math teacher, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be continuing my video series on two-variable statistics, and in particular, looking at how you can find the standard deviation of residuals and interpret it. So, if you find this video helpful, consider smashing that like button, subscribing, and let's go. So, I've given it to you here. So, the standard deviation of the residuals of this data set is about 12.694. So, my data set was some heights and weights I observed. I can predict the weights, and then I find the residuals by doing the actual weight minus the predicted weight. So, you can figure out how I got those. I did it in a previous video. Typically, I'm not going to have my students calculate this standard deviation by hand. If I'm going to have them calculate it at all, it's going to be with software, usually Microsoft Excel. But if you want to know what the equation of the standard deviation of your residuals is, it can be computed by the following function. So it is the sum of all your actual minus your predicted values squared divided by the number of values minus 2 and take the square root of that whole thing. So what you really have is this is the square root of the sum of your residuals all squared divided by 2 less than the number of different residuals you have included here. And if you do this, you can compute about 12.694. So typically, I'm not going to have my kids compute this. I'm going to give it to them and ask them to interpret it at most. But the thing is, standard deviation, whether you're talking about residuals, one variable data, it's all really the same idea. How far away on average are you from something? When you are looking at one variable data, you're thinking about it as how far on average are your values away from the mean. In this case, when you're looking for the standard deviation of residuals, it is talking about how far on average are your predictions and actual value away from the actual value. So we're interested in that. So if you want to interpret your standard deviation of residuals, you can interpret it as the following. So on average, this is just like any standard deviation interpretation. It's a sense of an average. And then we can ask, what are we talking about? This residual, it talks about the differences between weights and predicted weights. So on average, the actual weight and predicted weight. So the observed and predicted, actual and predicted, I use actual interchangeably with observed. So on average, the observed and predicted weights differ by about 12.694 pounds. So this is within context of my data. So residual talked about the difference between the observed and the predicted values, which you can see by the y minus y hat in our formula. And this is an average difference between these things. So if you need to interpret the standard deviation of residual, also it's normally called residual standard deviation, but I interchange it. This is how you can typically interpret it. Make sure you interpret it within context of whatever you are looking at though. So I was looking at the differences between actual and predicted weights, so that's why I referred to the weights in this interpretation. Now, you're also going to find this referred to as standard error in a lot of analysis packages like Excel. So be warned that it won't always be called residual standard deviation. So I hope you find this video helpful. If you did, smash that like button and have an awesome day.